Well, good afternoon, Exiles. This is this week's match preview ahead of Bristol Rovers against Newport County on Saturday, the big seven-side derby, although we will come on perhaps to talk about whether it is a proper derby. Early kickoff, don't forget as well. And I'm joined by Tom Day, who is a journalism student and Bristol Rovers expert. How you doing, Tom? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad. Looking forward to it this weekend. Yeah, big game.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. I've got to start off by asking, is Bristol Rovers the most kind of toxic fan base in Britain at the moment? Because, county fans were pretty disgruntled before Christmas with how things were going here. But looking across the Severn, it seems to me that Rovers fans are in open revolt. So, yeah, what's been going on? How toxic are things amongst your fan base?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much you could talk about. Obviously, comes from you'd say the higher ups, the Al Saeed ownership that's had a few seasons now. They sort of came in with big plans for the Premier League. We're going to build a big stadium, and I think they've obviously learned in real time that it's not that easy. We're obviously like many EFL clubs, lower leagues, making losses season after season. And, credit to them, obviously, they're sort of covering that as best they can. Um, yeah, obviously, we've gone a division down since they've come in with them looking to go a division or two up. We're now at the prospects being two down, let alone, this sort of two up that they were looking at, however quickly they wanted to get that done. So, that disconnect's been there almost from when they came in. Obviously, they sacked Joey Barton pretty quickly, which not everyone's cup of tea, but certainly for Rovers, delivered some really good moments, including the 7-0. So fans have been, you know, against them for not solely that decision, but sort of some naive comments and the lack of communication since relegation. Fans have put together a speak up or sell up, sort of fan led campaign group, which, you know, been very reasonable so far. I think that'll continue to build up as, depending how often they come out for the rest of the season. I think results are obviously key. I don't think a lot of that would have been stirred up as much without, so many poor results. Um, but I think Steve Evans coming in now, I think the change was necessary. So they are sort of they've recognised that, although they maybe brought back in Daryl, as a lot of fans would say, to sort of appease the fan base, bringing back a club legend who's got a promotion from League Two before. I think they recognised that wasn't going to work in the end.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's been a really interesting feature, I think, of this division over the last few years that sides who've come down from the third division, there's normally been one that's been a basket case and has dropped straight through. So, Carlisle, Morecambe. I don't think many of us had Bristol Rovers pegged as the side who might do that. If you look at your crowds and budget, Bristol Rovers are a kind of proper established league club. I know you had a brief spell in the conference a few years back, but is it just the ownership, or is there stuff on the pitch that's gone wrong for you as well?
Yeah. So I think that summer 2024, we obviously signed loads of we had big summer window. We're bringing in sort of young attackers, Rules Tyriu, Shaq Ford, Omachere, Isaac Hutchinson. A lot of young attackers, and they weren't probably the best equipped to be in a dogfight to the end of the season. But why we were in that position in the first place is, I don't want to say still a mystery, because a lot of fans will just say, well, maybe they weren't good enough. But
Mm.
I think a lot of fans were happy with that summer. There was a decent bit of money spent. Yes, we received money. Aaron Collins and Anthony Evans obviously going to sort of better places, but too many characters maybe that weren't up for that fight. I think a lot of, as I
Mm.
say, young players maybe making their first big move. The money involved in their deals isn't their fault, but I think if we look at Shaq Ford and Satiri in particular, have come in for arguably the most criticism. They were both leaving London for the big time, which not everyone wants to look at that aspect, but it's not acceptable if the effort's not there on the pitch, which I think was too often a criticism. But there is that human side, that a lot of turnover that season has
Mm.
been a sort of downwards from there, with a lot of people on 3-year deals.
And I suppose that brings us neatly onto this season then. So, ahead of Saturday, what should we expect from you tactically, and who are the danger men? Who should we be worried about?
It's interesting. So in those two seasons, I think Matt Taylor recruited to play a back three. Calderon then came in. sort of with his ideals of playing this really nice, almost Pep Guardiola-esque football,
And
sometimes
that
he's going to
always
throw
works
in.
out well in the lower leagues,
Yeah,
doesn't it? Yeah.
considering we're already struggling, that was sort of the nail in the coffin. Of course, there's a
Mm,
scenario where, and we did pick up some early results under him. There's a scenario where we play really nice football, get to mid-table, and he's still the manager of us now in League One. But obviously, trying to instill that style of football is another naive decision by him. Maybe it was naive to go from him. All these things going back to the owner's points, but sorry to bring it back to this week. We've gone back to a back three, which is
mm,
ironically sort of almost what got Darrell Clark the sack. Perhaps that a lot of players maybe weren't comfortable in it. Captain Alfie Kilgore said sometimes him at the back feels a bit of a spare part. That a lot of players,
mm,
not to put them down, but have played back four all their lives. To go to a three isn't on it. But we've looked solid in it against the second half in Salford and against MK. So back three not out of the question, which allows Fabrizio Cavan up front. I think he's got 13 goals this season to play that little bit closer to a target man, be it Ellis Harrison, who's still returning from injury
mm,
after spending most of December out, or a new striker, Meis Rijks, still working on that pronunciation. We signed him from Holland, 6'2", but he got a bit of a cameo at MK and looks
mm,
handy addition. Shaq Ford's look good. Isaac Hutchinson, like we got reasonable options, and one could argue it's a task to get them all in the team. I think I personally would, for that exact reason, would prefer to play a four against Newport. It's no disrespect, but I think the fans will get behind back four, a few more attackers on the pitch, and going for it than if it's a back three and it doesn't get going in a game like that, the crowd will maybe turn early.
yeah, I suppose also on paper you look at it and think, well, if you're at home to a relegation rival and you're not trying to get front foot, then that doesn't suggest a lot of confidence. But that sort of brings me neatly onto the final thing I was going to ask about to what extent you think Bristol Rovers are in a proper relegation scrap. Ultimately, do you think Steve Evans is the man to pull you out of it? Which I think probably a lot of us looked at it and thought, well, he should be. And who, if you think you will be pulled clear, who on the basis of what you've seen so far do you think will slip through the trapdoor to the conference?
I'm normally ever the optimist. I year on year I was like, oh no, we won't do it. But as you sort of said at the start, that the stats for League One clubs coming to League Two is rarely good for them then fighting towards the top. So to a lot of fans did sort of fancy a playoff automatic campaign. Maybe we'd be that one, but obviously it's not gone that way. So everyone understands we are in a proper scrap, and quite frankly, I think a lot of us were expecting to be that team in 23rd. Obviously
Mm,
yourselves not picking up that point against Accrington, or 3 points, as a
yeah.
lot of people thought. So I think if we go into 23rd, I mean, as you say, as we've said, the atmosphere is not brilliant at the moment, but I think as long as we can stay out of the bottom two, we'll fancy ourselves. I think to have enough. If you speak to most people, I think a lot of people do think, as we've said, that attacking talent has got just about enough legs to pull us through. But the question of mentality, whether they've got enough bite, which maybe led to us going down in the first place, which hopefully that as bringing on to Evans. Evans is the right character to bring that bit of bite. I think probably against MK last night we saw that. Don't want to say nastiness or gamesmanship, but maybe it was a scrappy game which only played into us. It's just frustrating to
Mm,
concede right before half time. I think Harrogate, don't want to say look down because you can never write a team off, but we hope Harrogate are down. And then, it is just a battle between yourselves, Newport, us, Crawley. I think we hope, no offense, Newport maybe are,
yeah.
are that team that go down. But yeah, I think just about in the Rovers camp, there's enough that it's not going to be a pretty end to the season, but I think we'll stay up. I think
Mm,
enough fans think that, but plenty also think, based on the trends of the last couple of years, that it will be a double relegation.
yeah. Well, we'll see on Saturday then which of the two teams comes out the stronger. But thank you very much for your time, Tom. It's been really good to talk to you, and yeah, doubtless catch up at some point in the future.
Pleasure.